everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I apologize for all of the timing delay. I know that's never easy, but we had a bunch of weather move into Tallahassee when we were trying to take off, and that pushed everything behind on our end. So they are on their way. We are a little bit ways out, but I'll keep you updated as I get more information. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for your patience and for being here. I know that the governor is very excited to be here. He's really excited about everything that's going on. And just, again, thank you so much for being here. At the very end, if there is time for questions as we wrap up this press conference, we do ask that it just comes from the media in the back. And then if you, as we get a little bit closer, if you wouldn't mind taking out your phone and silencing that. Our phones, as you know, like to go off at the most inopportune times. So if you wouldn't mind taking a moment just to silence that, that would be great. If you have any questions, I'll be wandering around and feel free to let me know. Thank you.
Test 1 2, test 1 2. This is an audio test. Give me a thumbs up if we're good. Perfect. Thank you. afternoon. It's great to see everybody. Grab a seat. It's great to be back in Northwest Florida. We love being in Bay County. I want to thank everybody who's come today. We're joined by Senator Jay Trumbull, who's the senator from Bay County. I don't know whether, when I announce the politicians, sometimes yes, sometimes no. I'm glad Jay got the thumbs up. We also have FWC Executive Director Roger Young, and then we have the Todds here, and you're going to hear from Jimmy Todd, who's hosting us here today at Treasure Island Marina. So I want to thank them for that. So we're going to talk about obviously marine-related issue today. But before I do that, I just want to wish the Florida Gators a good run today against Houston. Not everyone may want that in Northwest Florida, but most I think do when it becomes a Florida. Even my kids, who are very big in the Florida state, and we've asked them for many weeks, if Florida makes it, who are you going to root for? Who are you going to root for? Finally, they've admitted they're going to root for Florida to beat Houston. So, Gator Nation can rest assured that we have a united household in the state of Florida, at least in the governor's office. We all want to see them bring home a national championship. And then, late Friday, we see all this stuff with these judges, with what they're doing around the country, thinking that they can run the federal government, the executive branch, better than the elected president can do. So all the stuff that President Trump is implementing with executive power, almost all of that gets challenged immediately in the courts. And what do? They go find some judge who's going to say, oh, you can't do that. You can't send illegals back. You can't do all this. So that's not anything that we didn't know would happen. That's not something they and the administration didn't think would happen. That's just, unfortunately, par for the course. But we had, on Friday afternoon, we had one of these activist judges down in South Florida rule that one of the laws that we very carefully crafted working with the legislature to combat illegal immigration, that we can hold you accountable for illegally entering Florida, which we have used successfully, that somehow we're not allowed to do that. And that's an example of a judge trying to throw sand in the gears, trying to prevent us from doing what's right. We obviously are going to fight that. We're going to continue with our strong efforts to combat illegal immigration. No state is doing more to work with the Trump administration to enforce federal immigration laws and to return illegals to their home country. That's the mandate. That's what we've got to do. So we anticipated this fully. We know that just what happens when you do with these things, but we were also very careful in how we approached it. We understand other states have tried things similar. We definitely did it a little bit different in a way that ultimately can withstand fair-minded jurists, but on this case, I think we had no chance to be able to be successful. So stay tuned on that, but we're in that fight. We're not looking back. We're not going to take the pedal off the gas. Now, we're here in Panama City Beach because we have an opportunity to do something that really is a grassroots movement on boater freedom. And I'll talk about what we're looking to do and what Senator Trumbull is pushing in the Senate in a minute. But this is something that has grown out of people reporting to elected officials like Senator Trumbull, like me, about what needs to be done to make it better for boating and fishing in the state of Florida. Now, we have the top state in the country for boating and fishing anywhere, probably anywhere in the world, but certainly anywhere in the United States. And it's not even really close. Our recreational boating industry alone is $31.3 billion annually. And that's a 53% increase since 2018. What happened? When people started flooding down here, and some of this is good. It can help the economy, and certainly boats never did better. I mean, these people couldn't make the boats fast enough because people would come from north and they'd say, okay, you're in Florida, you got a boat, you got to fish, so we got to do this. And so they bought all these boats, and like these guys are making boats in Florida, had never done better. The problem is they didn't really know how to navigate with these boats because they hadn't done it before. And so we've kind of had some growing pains there. I think people see kind of some of the newly minted captains and kind of getting their sea legs. But the reality is it's been a big boom. We are now home to over 7,000 marine businesses, and that equates to over 100,000 jobs across the state of Florida just for the boating industry. In 2023, we surpassed 922,000 boat registrations statewide in the state of Florida. We are #1 in marine expenditures, and we have the most boats of any place in the country. We also have 4 million licensed anglers. And as I said, we're without peer when it comes to fishing. And look what we've done with Gulf red snapper, 105 days. Like, we took the bull by the horns on that one, and we're delivering great opportunity. Incidentally, I'm asking the Department of Commerce, which oversees NOAA, to take the success that we've had with state-managed Gulf red snapper and let the state of Florida manage Atlantic red snapper. You know how many days they gave in 24? They gave, well, 1 or 2, depending, but literally, they'll do a day, they'll do 2 days. There's a lot of red snapper out there. This is bogus data, just like it was bogus in the Gulf. I don't think it's ever been healthier now as we've expanded the season. So we give us the opportunity to manage that. And I told the Secretary of Commerce, I was like, we go out on the Atlantic coast and announce this, it's going to be huge support for being able to have an evidence-based red snapper season where there's a lot of red snapper out there. So we're working on that for sure. We want to make sure that we're able to do that. We've done a lot of different things over the years to be able to help this. We do the outdoor tax holiday over the summer for all these different supplies. It's been really fantastic. We also are proposing this year a marine fuel tax holiday over the summer, so no tax on marine fuel, which I know a lot of people who are boating would really like to see. So we're looking at what can we do given what's going on with how great this industry is, how great the recreational pursuits, the culture, everything that goes into it. And with this Boater Freedom Act, which Senator Trumbull is spearheading in the Senate, you also have Griffiths doing it in the House, but I'll say some in a minute. The House, really looks more intent to obstruct it than to actually pass it, even though our voters have been very clear to us that we want to see it passed. But this thing is, I think, something that was really important. One, it will establish the right to boat by preempting local governments from banning the sale or use of boats based on fuel sources. Now, this probably wouldn't happen in Bay County, but there may be some counties where they will say, well, you will not be able to purchase a gas-powered boat in the future. You can only do electric and all that. There's people that actually want to do that. That's not flying in the state of Florida. That's your choice, which type of boat you want to use, or which type of boat you want to sell, or which boat that you want to purchase. That is up to you. So we will ensure you can buy the vessel you want, and we will also maintain protections that we have that are common sense. We do have seagrass protection, manatee zones, wake speeds. That's fine. That's good. But don't tell us what type of boats that we have to buy. The bill will also right a wrong that has been an issue for far too long, and will finally bring it to an end. Current law allows both state and also local law enforcement to pull a boater over when no probable cause or suspected violation has occurred, and they can conduct inspections without having even a pretext to do so. This could include personal property searches, sometimes leads to further law enforcement action beyond safety compliance. While laws previously passed have attempted to solve this, the problem persists, and our voters let us know that the problem persists. Therefore, as part of the Boater Freedom Act, we will end this practice by prohibiting the use of a safety inspection as probable cause to pull over a boater. You have to have real probable cause if you want to pull over a boater, and that's going to be the law in the state of Florida. And this is a very fair and balanced approach, and you absolutely have the ability, if somebody is doing something wrong, you absolutely have the ability to make sure that the law is enforced. The bill also directs FWC to work with tax collectors to proactively provide a Florida Freedom Boater decal at registration. This decal will assure law enforcement that the boater has done the due diligence of inspecting and maintaining proper boater safety requirements. And so there's no need to mess with if you see that, which I think is really, really good. And look, FWC does a great job. Our local partners do a great job in a variety of capacities. And you've had FWC, you've had locals be involved in things. I mean, we had kids polluting waterways, dumping full trash cans of trash off their boat, and you had folks there that work for us that help stop that, and that's the right thing to do. But by unlimiting unwarranted vessel inspections without probable cause, FWC officers can better allocate resources and time to cases where there is a clear need for intervention, protecting wildlife, and ultimately doing the work that they do. And I think most people agree that's a more common sense approach. This will increase the strength of the relationships between officers and the boating community. The Act also strikes an appropriate balance between ensuring compliance with boating laws and reducing unnecessary disruptions for law-abiding boaters, making enforcement more practical and effective. Finally, the bill will also invest in additional boat ramps, parking, and marina programs through FWC that will ensure the public has access to the waters of our great state, all the way from Biscayne Bay to here, right on the newly named Gulf of America along the west coast of Florida. Now, I mentioned that Senator Trumbull is spearheading this in the Senate. It's moving through. It's got a lot of bipartisan support. People understand this is not something that Senator Trumbull or I just kind of cooked up on our own or trying to foist through. This is something that's a response to boaters throughout Florida who have reported what they would like to see to be able to strengthen this great pastime and to help this really important part of our state's culture. And so that's why it's gotten support. That's why they're doing it. Now, the Florida House of Representatives, as has been true, unfortunately, for the last couple months, they seem to be more interested in obstructing the passage of this legislation. They seem to have taken this weird tack where they're coming in and they have this massive supermajority that they built off the work of many others, to be quite frank, and they come in and they're trying to undo a lot of the stuff that Jay and I and others worked for over many, many years without campaigning on any of this, without telling voters that this is what you want to do. But then you turn around, and who are they doing the bidding for? Not you, but people like Morgan and Morgan. I don't want the state run by Morgan and Morgan. I want the state run by what the people voted for. And so you have this thing where they're trying to repeal progress. They never told the voters they would do this. And then they basically take a tack. Well, if the voters are asking us to do something and we're leading on that, then they're just going to try to obstruct for the sake of obstruction. That's not what you voted for. You voted for people to continue the success of Florida and what we've been able to accomplish over these many years. And I think to waste this with these antics and refusing to actually do the people's work, that just doesn't make sense. I mean, just think about taxes. I was going out for many months because of listening to people like you talking about the need for property tax relief. People are getting killed on property taxes. What do? Because I'm doing property, so they got to do something else. They want to do tax cuts for Canadian tourists and for non-residents. Why would we ever be doing that? We should be doing property tax, but it's just because they got to be obstruction. It's just because they got to be different. In fact, they brought into the party a liberal Democrat from down in South Florida. She switches parties to be Republican, even though she's very, very liberal and opposed us on everything for 6 years. Very liberal, now in charge of like a major committee, running all this liberal legislation, getting all this stuff in the budget. And I'm thinking to myself, is that what you voted for in Bay County, to turn the reins over to some liberal rep in Broward County? Nobody campaigned on that. That was not what you were doing. So this is just another example. I mean, I would think that reps would be wanting to do something that the voter freedom is. And because it's not something I cooked up, it's not something Jay Trumbull cooked up, it's something that people have been asking for really for many years, but certainly in more recent times, this has been something that's been very important. And so we're listening to the folks and we're delivering those results to them. So I want to commend Senator Trumbull and the other members of the Senate who've really worked hard to be able to move this forward. If it doesn't pass the House, it's only because of them taking an obstructionist bent, not because it doesn't have support from the vast majority of folks throughout the state of Florida and even in that particular chamber. So let's get this done. I look forward to the Senate continuing to pursue this. I think this will make a real positive difference in the lives of Floridians, but particularly with respect to our boating community. So thank you, everybody. And now we'll hear from Jay, then we'll hear from our other speakers.
Thank you so much, Governor. The governor obviously loves Bay County because he took off in Tallahassee under a tornado warning. So thanks for putting yourself in peril to be with us today. The governor talked a whole lot about how we got to this point, and truly, Governor, the reason we are trying to pass a piece of legislation like this is because of people like you. My next door neighbor was stopped 3 times for a safety inspection one day last summer. And so it truly is a grassroots thing. And we're saying that your constitutional rights don't just stop when you get onto a boat off the dock. They should continue, and you should have probable cause to be able to have somebody to be able to be pulled over. And I do think it's important to make sure that there's a significant distinction between doing the right, and breaking the law. And this does not stop law enforcement, whether local or FWC, from stopping you if you've broken the law. This just says that you can't have some random safety inspection occurring day in and day out, making sure, though, that we're keeping folks safe. There's another portion of this bill, Senate Bill 1388, and I'm thankful that it is moving through the process. It's in its second committee this week, and thankful that we have gotten bipartisan support in the Senate. And I know that Representative Griffiths is working hard to try to get the bill up in the House. But there's this other portion of the bill that the governor talked about that says, no, we're not going to say which boats you can and can't have. They can be propelled by one type of gas, or they can be propelled by electric or whatever. It's your choice to make those decisions, and we're not going to preempt the voters or Floridians from being able to make those choices like other states have implemented. And so I'm incredibly encouraged that we continue to push the envelope on making Florida the freest state in the country. And and it starts with policies like this. And so, Governor, I thank you for your support on this. I'm excited to get this across the finish line in the Senate. And to the Todds, thank you for hosting us. I know the weather's not phenomenal today, so we're not probably going to take any of these boats out. But it's great to be able to see everybody and see so much support for what we're trying to accomplish, and really know that we're giving families more autonomy and the ability to enjoy the great resources that we have in Florida. So thank you, sir.
All right. Roger.
Thank you, Governor DeSantis. It's great to be here in Panama City today. What an outstanding day. It's always great to be in this community. Such a great boating and fishing community. And thanks to the Todds and the Treasure Island Marina for hosting us. What a great facility this is to help boaters get out on the water. And on behalf of the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, I want to thank you, Governor, for your continued leadership in supporting Florida's boating and angling communities, just like this one. Florida is the boating capital of the world, and at FWC, we're committed to ensuring our waterways are safe, accessible, and responsibly enjoyed. The Boater Freedom Act reflects a balanced approach protecting public safety and conservation while also representing the rights of responsible boaters. This act will eliminate random safety checks and ensure that the day on the water can be enjoyed by all law-abiding citizens and boaters. By creating a streamlined inspection decal program, eliminating random stops, this legislation allows officers to focus resources where they're needed most, on serious violations and conservation efforts that keep our waters and our resources healthy. FWC stands in support and supports these efforts, and we look forward to working with Governor DeSantis, Senator Trumbull, and Representative Griffiths on implementing the Boater Freedom Act, to help ensure that Florida remains the best place in the world to boat, fish, and enjoy the outdoors. So thank you, Governor. Appreciate it.
Let's see. First of all, we're very honored to have the governor here today, 46th governor, state of Florida, our great state. And we're honored to have Senator Jay Trumbull here today. And we're honored to have Roger, our new administrator, director of the FWC. And we are excited to have our locals, Claire Peace, thank you for being here, Chuck Perdue, and lots of you people that I didn't call your name, but we really appreciate you being here. The media, we appreciate you covering the event. And Lisa and Anna, our owners, Treasure Island Marina. And every time we get hit, and every time we have a tornado or a hurricane, they say, build it back. And so that's what we've done here with this new facility. I'm Jimmy Todd, and I'm the president and CEO of Treasure Island Marina. And I want to extend a strong support for the upcoming Boater Freedom Act making its way through the Florida legislature. And this is a meaningful and very much needed step for the boating community and local businesses like ours that depend on fair, consistent access to our waters. I'd also like to acknowledge and thank Senator Jay Trumbull for his leadership in authoring this bill and carrying forward what I understand are your goals for protecting Floridians' rights and preserving access to our marine heritage. We stand with you in ensuring Florida remains a place where responsible boating is supported, not restricted. Please don't hesitate to reach out if we can assist in furthering these efforts on the local level. Thank you very much for being here.
Okay. Well, I think this will be really, really good. This is sound legislation, very well thought out. And as Senator Trumbull said, obviously, whatever the rules of the road are, you have the ability as a law enforcement to enforce that. Well, this is preventing is to just go up to a boat because you feel like it and conduct a, quote, safety inspection without there being a basis to do so in the first place. And I think that will cause much better relations between everybody, and it's consistent with how we typically conduct law enforcement operations, where you do have the requirement to have a basis, a probable cause before you stop somebody or conduct any type of a search. So it's sound. I think it's long overdue, but I really thank everybody who spoke up for really a long time. I mean, certainly the last couple years, people have been talking about, hey, we'd love to see this. So this is really answering the call from a lot of folks who know what they're talking about. So thank you for doing this for Senator Trumbull. And, we'll see whether, it makes it all the way through the process. I'm confident that the Florida Senate is going to pass this, and that'll be a big win for Florida. Okay, do we have any questions back there? Yes. So in terms of recreational fishing, I'm not sure that that's going to be necessarily as direct. I think the issue is more with that is the federal government is restricting the ability of our anglers to utilize the resources that are here in the Atlantic. In the Gulf, when they gave us the the management of the Gulf, what do you have? You have the largest Gulf red snapper season than we've ever had under state management, because we led on it and we insisted that we get it right and that we not take outdated data and act like there aren't fish in the sea. There's fish in the sea. They're there. And so we were able to do that. I think we need to do the same thing on Atlantic, but that would be the biggest thing. If they gave us the ability to manage the Atlantic red snapper season, that would be the biggest boon to the boating and fishing community in the state of Florida that we could have right now. If they continue to restrict, that's really what chokes off the opportunities more than anything else. And so I think the administration is supportive of it. I have mentioned it to the president, but I've definitely mentioned it also to the Secretary of the Commerce, and I know they're still filling out NOAA, and they're doing still all that, and there's a lot of irons in the fire. But returning this to state management would be a home run, and trust me, we will not simply say one day. That's not going to work. So everybody on the Atlantic coast, I mean, you know, you guys are lucky over here. You have much better options with respect to, you know, for the Gulf red snapper. But Atlantic, we got to do better, and that's just the federal government, and it has long predated the current administration, just having outdated data, and quite frankly, the bureaucracy being more ideological and purpose-driven rather than evidence-based. So now we've already shown it can be done in the Gulf, and we're going to show it can be done in the Atlantic, and that'll be a huge boon for Florida anglers. No, this is good legislation, and you know, like all these things, there's ideas, and then you got to render those ideas into legislative text, and there's always give and take with what a legislator may want in each house, and then what I'd be willing to sign. But basically, I think this is good, and it's really been a team effort, and so we look forward to coming back to Bay County to be able to sign this into law. Maybe we'll get that on the calendar and hopefully get it done. Final thing I'll just say before before I take off is one of the things I've been involved with. So the state of Florida, our legislature has passed resolutions for a balanced budget amendment to the U.S. Constitution. And we have now 27 states that have done that. If you get 34, then it can be submitted for ratification, and you need 3/4 of the states to ratify. But you look at what's going on in Washington, you look at these different budgets, like no one wants to stop spending all this money. And I just wonder, can that go on indefinitely? Well, you don't have to wonder. I think we know that that can't go on indefinitely. The only thing I think that will be effective to get us in fiscal shape over an extended period of time is to have a requirement in the Constitution that basically prohibits politicians from bankrupting the country, because I think that they're willing to do that if they can. Other states are considering this. I was just up visiting and talking to legislators in Idaho, Montana. I know South Carolina, there's a bunch that are doing it. But if you look at I don't really see a change in trajectory from what Congress is discussing. And I think the reality is in Florida, we have a balanced budget requirement. Now, we run big surpluses. We've paid off 41% of our state's total debt over a 180-year period. It was accumulated. We've done a lot of good stuff on our own, but having that balanced budget requirement makes it clear that you can't just spend to spend, and you got to make ends meet, and they're not willing to do that in Washington. And if you look at the debt that's been accumulated over the last 25 years, unfortunately, it has been both parties. It's not like it's all one party or the other. And I'm just convinced that regardless of who's in, you're not going to get this right over the long term unless you have some constitutional restraints on their ability to spend and borrow indefinitely. It's one thing when you have like World War II or some of these things where you have these really true, emergency situations. But like now, it's like just as a matter of course that you're $2 trillion annually in the hole. And I don't care how much you tax people, and I'm for lower taxes, but even when they try to raise taxes, people change their behavior. You end up getting about the same amount of revenue as a percentage of GDP under various different tax rates. And so that should tell you it's really the spending that needs to be moderated and reduced. And until they're doing that, I think that we're always going to have, different possibilities. And people say, well, how long can this go? How come we haven't had a major crisis by now? And the answer is, I don't think anybody really knows, but I think we do know there will be a point at which we will have some really significant consequences. So that's something that Florida's led on, both on balanced budget that the legislature ratified or certified for debate for amending the federal Constitution, and term limits for members of Congress, quite frankly. You do need to term limit Congress. We'd be much better if we did that. Some of these people have been there. I mean, like, you go back to the 80s and watch, like, footage from the House, and who's there? Pelosi was there, and she's still there now. I mean, it's unbelievable. And then for some reason, members of Congress, they all should be hedge fund managers because they make so much money in the market with these like very curiously timed stock trades and putting money here and there. And unfortunately, that's on both parties too. And you're just thinking about it like, man, what is going on up there? So balanced budget requirement, term limits. Florida's led on both of those. They're further along on the balanced budget amendment. A lot of states have already approved that, and you need a certain threshold to trigger for it to be amended to the Constitution. But term limits, I haven't found very many issues where you can get people, Republican, Democrat, male, female, black, white, it doesn't matter. People get that term limits would be a positive reform for members of Congress. So I leave you with those two things because I do think we're at a situation where you do need to have some constitutional reforms to be able to rein in what's going on in Washington. I don't think left to their own devices, you're going to see major changes out of the Congress. At least we haven't seen it so far in 2025, and I think a lot of people are very, very disappointed. Okay, well, we've got a big game tonight. All the Gator fans out there in Gator Nation, hopefully they bring it home. Thanks, everybody.
Hey, thank you very much. How you doing? Good to see you. You guys doing well? Great.